right, today on Talk About Games, we are talking about not the original PlayStation, but we don't have it right here because it's not out yet. The PlayStation Classic or the PlayStation Mini. It's really
PlayStation Classic.
It's funny to me that they're calling it the PlayStation Classic because it was like the NES Classic, the Super Nintendo Classic. They're just like, fuck it. Yeah, they didn't want to come up with
this was
name.
The easiest product design meeting they ever had at PlayStation. They were like, what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to do what Nintendo did.
Yeah. What did Nintendo do?
Yeah, exactly.
One of those. So let's talk about it. What do you want to start with?
So I guess the big thing we want to talk about is following in the vein of the NES, Super Nintendo, like you said, there's going to be a small, about this big version of the classic PlayStation. We can't call it a PS1 because it's not the PS1. It's the PlayStation. The
PSX.
You can't even call it that. It's a PlayStation Classic, and they're nailing home that they're going for this early PlayStation look because the controllers do not have the analog sticks. They're releasing it in the same package just like it was originally.
It's got like the D-pads, right?
It's got the D-pads.
Let's talk about that first. What do you think about that decision? I'm sure it's for cost effectiveness, but what do you think of the fact that they're not including the analog sticks for those games?
I think it could be one of two things. The first thing, it could be, hey, but they're going to sell you analog sticks down the line. Mm-hmm. Because the new system doesn't have the classic PlayStation controller ports. They're different. So the controllers that you used back in the PlayStation era aren't going to work with the system. Mm-hmm. It's a new form factor. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to go with analog sticks, that's going to be an add-on. My thought was because there are fewer PlayStation generations than there are Nintendo generations. Next year, if following the product line, they're going to launch the PS1 Mini, which is the redesigned, with the DualShocks, with the white DualShocks in that case. And I think that would divide it up. So what would that mean? If we assume that they're leaving the analog games for later, that means that on this one, we're more likely to see like the large box games being featured heavily because none of them required analog. Mm-hmm. But then if down the line they plan to release a like sequel to this, but still in the PlayStation era, you'd end up with stuff like Ape Escape. You'd end up with stuff that requires the analog sticks that came later. Do
you think like that console they would just include stuff that's mostly analog stick?
I think they could get away with that.
Yeah, that would be cool. Since this one's mostly D-pad stuff.
Exactly.
So I want to talk about the games that are included on this. Final Fantasy VII, you got to have that.
Yeah.
Tekken 3, Ridge Racer, Wild Arms, Jumping Flash. Those are all good choices. But the big question is, what are going to be the other 15 games? Now, I forget off the top of my head how many the SNES Classic and the NES Classic had.
It was more than 20, though.
But it was more than 20. The Commodore 64 one had 64 games. But, I mean, we're not going to go there. But 20 games, it feels like not quite enough, but it's not bad either. Especially considering maybe this later on, maybe they'll have like a downloadable option. I don't know if that's true.
There's no if you look at the back of the system, there's only the HDMI and the power. There's no add-on ports.
But there's a USB.
There's a USB, but what are you going to plug a wireless thing? Who knows, you know? I think there's...
I know what people are already going to say in the comments.
Yeah.
They're going to say, oh, you can hack it. But as far as, what you're supposed to be able to do, I think the option would be some way to download the games.
It would be cool, but
yeah,
Sony has a system that you can download PS1 games on.
Yeah.
It's called the PlayStation 4.
Yeah, the PlayStation 4. And speaking of that, all these games were already released downloadable on the PS3 and probably ones on the PS4.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, you can already get those games. Now, I know the NES Classic and the Super Nintendo Classic, you can get most of those games like on the Wii U downloadable and all that. But one thing I want to mention is they already released this product before. It was called the PS TV, and that did have analog sticks. Now, the problem with that was nobody knew it existed because the marketing for it was shit.
You're talking about, it was basically, the PS TV was basically a PlayStation Vita without the Vita part that you used regular controllers on.
Also, this is selling for $99.
That's a lot. $30 more than the...
That was, the PS TV was much cheaper than that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just say, like, I think the NES and SNES class, those are about $70. I think that's much better value for your money. This also, by the way, does not come with the AC adapter. And for a product...
Really?
For a product that does not have the AC adapter, that's a problem. Because what if you want to play this game, you're going to a hotel, you're going somewhere... You don't have a way to plug it in via USB. You can't play it.
I guess they assume that most TVs have USB ports in the back now. But still,
you can still buy one in addition. But you're already paying $99 plus buy that. Yeah. That's too much money.
It goes back to when the PlayStation 2. I'm sorry, when the PlayStation was announced. Mm-hmm. I believe that
the original.
Yeah. Sega was selling the Saturn for $299, I think, and the PlayStation stages this big press conference that they're going to announce the PlayStation and have all these features and all this press, and gave everybody in the press all these press kits with all this data. The guy just walks up and he's like, $249 and then gets off the stage and it's over. Right? And that was like a big shot to the Saturn because you know, at that time, it might have even been $199. At that time, the Saturn was super expensive and people thought that the PlayStation was going to match the price. And a lot of the reason the Saturn lost was because the PlayStation was $50 cheaper.
Yeah. And that's usually how it goes. A lot of times, usually Nintendo is the cheapest console.
Yeah,
and I felt like a lot of times when Nintendo was struggling for a little while there, I feel like that kept them really going because they always kept the low prices. Because a lot of times families, when it comes times for Christmas, they go... You know, the people that, you know, the fathers and the mothers that don't know anything about video games and don't care, they're like, which one's the cheapest? And then they pick that. You know?
Which sucks if your parents had the JCPenney catalog because you're getting an Atari.
Which that's what I had. Which you guys know very well. So let's talk about the games that we would like to see on it. So there's going to be 15 other games that are going to be on it, but the big question is, what are those 15 other games? So we came up with a list of games that we think should be included, or let's go through your list. Okay. We both wrote a list.
So we both wrote a list. I put some thought into my list. My list is not like my nerdy, these are the deep cuts. My list is like, these are the games that I think can be on it. And I'm making the following assumptions. The first assumption is that they have to limit the number of companies they're licensing from. So on my list, I chose some good ones from the era. I chose Capcom, I chose Konami, and I chose, funny enough, Square Enix, and the last one was Neversoft. So I chose 4 different licensors, and most of them have multiple games. So, and I kind of tried to take the trend of what they've already shown us in Jumping Flash, Wild Arms, Tekken, and Ridge Racer to extend that. So, my first game is Twisted Metal 2. And I picked Twisted Metal 2 because I think that that's one of the first games that really, or the first series that really showed gamers what PlayStation gaming would be like. And it was 2-player. It was a lot of fun. Driving around
Everybody
cars.
loves that.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Twisted Metal 2. The next one I chose was Jet Moto 2. Jet Moto is a cool series. It's a hover bike racing series. A lot of people remember it because like it has sponsorships from like Mountain Dew and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. And you have a grappling hook. So you have to like swing around turns. Yeah. The grappling hook, it's pretty cool.
I actually haven't played that one.
Yeah, so. Don't play that game. It hasn't aged well.
Okay. So it shouldn't. Oh, you're talking about the other. Okay.
Jet Moto 2. But Gran Turismo 2.
I also have that on my list. Yeah.
I picked that because it's Sony first party, or Sony developed for a long time. It was the greatest racing simulation game of all time.
The only thing I feel about that, haven't a bunch of the later ones been better?
It's still more fun.
It's the gameplay is better.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. I like it. I mean, what happened was, for me at least, Gran Turismo was where I needed to be in terms of simulation versus arcade action. the games got like more nerdy when it came to the like.
My question about that though is, what about the cars and the brands? We'll talk about licensing. They licensed it back then and were able to do that, but wouldn't they have to re-license it for this? I feel like that might be problematic.
I definitely think that that's a business concern, right? Yeah. Because what did what did Sony pay back then? Are those licenses still active? Yeah. It could be a nightmare. There's like thousands of cars.
I feel like that one maybe not be on there because of that problem.
Yeah.
We'll see though.
Making it simple. Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, also on my list. Yeah.
Yeah. Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
If that game's not on there, fuck this thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be.
It has to be on there.
It has to be.
And I mean, that follows the same precedent that we had with the NES and Super Nintendo. If Nintendo was able to get the licensing done for Castlevania and Super Castlevania, definitely Symphony of the Night should be good. Yeah. I know that, Mike, when we were sitting down before we were recording, you had another Castlevania game that you thought would be cool, but didn't think they would necessarily.
Oh yeah, I have it over here.
Yeah.
I have Castlevania Chronicles, but we were talking about this before, and Ryan had a really good point about it. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's a remake. The remakes, it's a re-release. I mean, I know it has new things, but it's not like a main title.
And we're talking about 15 other games out of all the games in the PlayStation library.
Yeah.
Not quite.
It's like the same reason, like, you could say, oh, what about Chrono Trigger? What about Final Fantasy VI? What about Final Fantasy IV? What about Final Fantasy 1 and 2? They're all re-releases, right? Mm-hmm. So, that'd be pretty hard to do. Wipeout XL. Wipeout XL is PlayStation's F-Zero. And having the soundtrack from, songs like Firestarter and stuff like that, it's just pretty crazy. I think Wipeout XL is a good one. Resident Evil 2?
Okay.
Because...
How do you not have Resident Evil? Like, you have to have a Resident Evil on there.
I think so. Yeah. I think Resident Evil 2 is the one to go with.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Nemesis, but that's like a later title. And if they do what I think they're going to do, where they split it into two, maybe that'll be the next one. Final Fantasy Tactics.
I know I'm
a huge fan of it. Yeah. And I think that we're seeing the re-release. I mean, granted, okay, so we know they already have Tactics on PS4.
And this could definitely... They already have Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
So...
Right.
But the only thing about this, do you think they would do 2 Final Fantasies?
They're totally different games.
Yeah.
Totally different games. Right. But I think Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the best tactical RPGs of all time, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be on this console. Parappa the Rapper, it's a Sony game. It's a rhythm game. It's different. The only reason I think it might get cut is because rhythm games are kind of... a less mainstream niche, but I think it's good.
I'd be kind of surprised at that one, but that'd be interesting.
I put this on the list even though it's an analog game, and I think it's important because it shows that Sony developed platforming, and they kind of started playing in Nintendo's backyard as the PlayStation went on, and that's Ape Escape.
Well, if it's an analog game, then it can't really be for this one, though, right?
You can still play it.
You can still
play it.
Yeah.
And it's first party. It doesn't cost them any money.
Yeah. Okay.
So if the analogs are an accessory for this console, or they never plan on doing another one of these, I think Ape Escape will definitely be on the list.
Now, here's one that I chose on my list, too. Mega Man X4, assuming that they get the Capcom license. I'm not a big fan of some of the later ones, but X4 is really good.
Yeah.
It's also pretty hard. That's the one Mega Man game that should definitely be on there.
Right, and having Resident Evil 2, you feel like Capcom might be in the mix if they have, the Resident Evil. So, Mega Man X4, pretty good. Still Capcom, Street Fighter Alpha 3. I didn't really see the PlayStation as a Street Fighter specific system. Mm-hmm. If you're playing Street Fighter 3, you're probably playing it on Dreamcast. If you're playing Marvel vs. Capcom,
that's Dreamcast.
You're probably playing that on Dreamcast. But there was Marvel Superheroes, X-Men vs. Street Fighter Alpha 3. And I think Street Fighter Alpha 3 is the one that they would bring out of all those, because there's no Marvel licensing. There's no...
I see you got it on there, and this is almost the Halloween season. We got
Silent Hill.
Silent Hill is another one that I feel like has to be on here.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear anybody talk about the original PlayStation, Silent Hill, It's got to be.
Yeah, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
This as well.
What makes you think PlayStation more than Tony Hawk Pro Skater? And I think 2 is probably
That's true.
one of the best representatives of the series, although it is better on Dreamcast. It's funny, a lot of the games that I like on PlayStation I play on Dreamcast. Yeah. But, like, again, that's like a nerdy thing and not a mainstream thing. And my last game on the list, I do have some honorable mentions too, but my last game on the list is Suikoden 2. It's one of the most expensive games for the PlayStation. They've already re-released... they might have re-released 2, but they've already released Suikoden 1 on, like, the eShop type thing. So, 2 might be on there. I don't know. But Suikoden 2 is rounding out the RPGs. And I think games like Suikoden 2, games like Final Fantasy Tactics, Metal Gear Solid, Castlevania need to be on a 20-game system to justify the $100 price. Mm. Right? Because when you have these huge, like, 40, 50, 100-hour experiences, then it starts making sense.
That's true.
They're not putting Balloon Fight on there.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. These games are much longer, than most of the... I mean, there's, like, Earthbound and stuff.
Right.
So there's some longer ones on the Nintendo one. So, I think Ryan pretty much covered it as far as the games. My list is very, very similar. So I just want to mention, like, in case they end up doing some kind of downloadable thing. I don't know if they will because you already said that it might not even be possible. But one big one that I really think needs to be on there personally is Pepsi Man. Like, where is Pepsi Man? Yeah. Actually, I believe this is like Japan only. So. Yeah. But that would be a good one to put on there, like as a joke or something.
You know what I think's funny about this? Right now, if you do a Google search for PlayStation games, Pepsi Man shows up as like the top game.
Because it's like
I guess some people like ran it up.
Okay, so seriously though, one game that I actually really, really love, and I don't want to like glare on this, but Einhander. I'm a big fan of shooters, so enough said. I really would love if that was on there somehow. Not even really downloadable. I just want that to be one of the ones that's included.
Come on, Square Enix. Where's Zweihander?
Yeah,
that's what I'm waiting for.
Then now these are picks. I did reviews of these a long time ago. This is only if there's extras somehow with downloadable. Yeah. Pandemonium and Klonoa. I enjoyed these a lot. This is like a 2.5D game that I enjoyed in Klonoa. You can watch my reviews that I did a long time ago on those, but those were fun. There's a million different games that could be on there.
I think it's funny you have this here because this is Alundra right here. And see how it's shiny? See how the thing is shiny? That's because this is part of Working Design's series of games. And Working Designs is a company that doesn't exist anymore. But they made awesome RPGs and published awesome RPGs. And they all had these shiny covers on them. The game that you probably know from Working Designs is Lunar: The Silver Star Story. Mm-hmm. On Sega CD and also on the PlayStation.
And just in case they were to include this, speaking of long games, like some of these games are very, very long. Talk about value for your money. Crash Bandicoot. I'd be kind of surprised if that wasn't on there. Siphon Filter, another good one. There's a million other games. I still think 20 games might be... If it was 25 games, I'd be like, okay. But 20 games, not quite sure.
Where's Vagrant Story? Where's Vandal Hearts? Where's Parasite Eve? Those are the games that there's no way they're in a 20-game collection. But they should be.
There are other systems that I'm hoping get this treatment. One, Dreamcast.
Yeah.
I should get it.
100%.
Obviously, like, they're probably going to do an N64. That's like a given. One that I'd like to see, and I was surprised when the Commodore 64 one came out. That's actually really cool. I hope they do that bigger mold of it. But I personally really want to see like a TG16 and a PC Engine CD because those games are very rare. I collect those games. They're very expensive. They're very hard to find. Even when I go to the game conventions, there might be a seller here or there that has one or two, and they're usually very expensive. I think that would be a great one, because if you talk about the SNES Classic, everybody's like, oh, Earthbound is on there, and Earthbound's a rare game. You don't talk about rare games. PC Engine CD, the whole fucking thing would be pretty much rare games. So, and those are excellent games. That would be more geared toward, people that like shooters and that kind of things. But PC Engine, does have its, fan base, and I think that would be really good. The problem with all of these systems, if you're going to ask me though, PlayStation, Dreamcast, all this stuff, and I said this in the Commodore 64 video, but these games do not look as good on flat screen monitors as they used to back in the day. So a lot of people say the value in playing it, you're still not getting that original experience. There is a reason to own the original discs. It just does not look as good. You're
never going to get the quality upscaler that you need in a $100 system, because the upscaling hardware costs more than the whole system to do it right the way it needs to be. And now we're getting into 4K TVs, and once people start getting used to that 4K look, like in the PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, and future systems, I mean, hey, look, there's already people saying that there's dev kits in the wild for the next generation after this. That generation is going to be 4K required. Definitely. That's my feeling. Then you go back and it's like, okay, now we're going to look at these older games in this 4K 60 landscape. It's going to be hard. A lot of the games on PlayStation and N64 and of that era suffer from awful frame rates. Awful screen resolutions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and another thing, we've already done a bunch of these like classic console stuff. Everybody just talks about that these are emulator systems.
Right.
And that's another reason. The original games, and I always say these things are great for the value, and I think for the average consumer, these are fantastic. You get your there's a lot of people that also don't give a shit.
Right.
A lot of people are just whatever, but the hardcore gamers are always going to want to have the original stuff.
Yeah, man. I mean, why pay $100 for this? Fortnite's free. No, but in all seriousness, for $100, I'm guessing that you probably only could get one or two of these. And if your PlayStation journey is only going to take you to the surface level, you probably want to buy one of these, because you're going to get so much more value with your money if you're not a hardcore collector. And, keeping these games nice, worrying about bit rot and a million other problems, laser replacements, that kind of thing. Maybe you don't want to do any of that. You do this.
Yeah. That's true. I have gone through so much of that kind of stuff, having consoles modded and this and that to get it to work. If you put through the work, it looks great, and it's to me it's worth it. But most people really probably don't have the time or the resources to do it. But that's
So we will be back in early December with a comprehensive review of the real thing.
Yeah, I would definitely like to do that.
And I'm curious. I think it's going to be more fun to debate not what they should do, but what they had done and what got omitted and what got in.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.